This is Neil Schneider for MTBS TV at CES 2015. I'm joined by Lachlan Wilson, who's CTO for Fove. I hope I pronounced that properly. And Fove, actually, you're part of the Microsoft Accelerator program, if I'm correct.
We're an alumni of that program. We've just finished. We're back in Japan now doing our development full-time there. Well, of course, we're here for CES, but other than that, everything's back in Japan.
So there's obviously a lot of excitement about virtual reality and immersive technology in general. So tell us about Fove. What are you doing?
So we're making an eye-tracking head-mount display. So this is unique because previously virtual reality has basically just been passive technology. It displays an image for you, but it doesn't really let you interact. We're bringing your own eyes now into the virtual reality world, and that is very powerful in the sense that we can use that as information in the game world. We can interact with game menus using our eyes. Game characters can recognize what you're looking at, where you're looking at, etc. So we increase immersion and control. So depth of field is another very important thing. It reduces simulation sickness. And also we're looking at foveated rendering, which has the potential to lower the hardware bar very significantly for virtual reality. So rather than requiring very high-end systems, you now could go on a medium end.
So for those unfamiliar, can you explain what foveated rendering is? Like, why is it so important?
Foveated rendering is important because when you're in virtual reality, you have to oversample the image. You're drawing a hell of a lot of pixels. So on a WQHD display like we're doing now, we're drawing close to 3.5K of pixels to get a really good image. And that has a significant overhead. So a lot of the image is wasted because our visual acuity is limited to a very small area. And if we can instead render the high resolution areas appropriately while reducing the quality of the surrounding area, we produce a seamless image. So we don't notice there's anything wrong with the image, yet we save a heck of a lot of processing.
So what I'm gathering is, like, when I play a video game, I'm usually, let's say it's on a television, and it's like, let's say a 1080p or a 4K television. That's a lot of pixels. But, you know, in this VR world, you know, we obviously, performance is of critical, you know, is very key. We can't waste any frames. So by using this foveated technology, I gather we're only processing what we really need to see versus the entire frame. Is that correct?
Our initial measurements indicate that in pretty good circumstances, we can get a 6-fold increase in effective processing power on a platform. And this does things like, on very high-end systems, would enable real-time ray tracing. And on normal systems, this basically means you can render an image that otherwise you could not, and give a player a very satisfactory user experience.
So, you know, when I was looking at this, by the way, I thought the imagery was very clear. I thought it was very, very crisp. Can you speak to the specs of the display?
Absolutely. This is a WQHD display, so it's wide quad high definition, 2560 by 1440 pixels. And we're only going to go up from there. There's no going down. So our dev kit will have this, at least, or better.
And what about latency? Do you have any indication on that?
Depends on which kind of latency you're referring to. We've got our latency of the eye tracking system. We've got the latency of movement to last pixel. Movement to last photon. So which one are you referring to?
How about both?
Okay, so on the current prototype that you tried, our latency for eye tracking is actually about 40 milliseconds. Most of that's the sensor technology. The next prototype, which unfortunately isn't working right now, has reduced the sensor latency down to less than 10 milliseconds, and our processing 8. So we do that eye tracking in under 20 milliseconds. The display, at the moment, we're not yet using the just-in-time warps technology. Of course, we're talking to NVIDIA. They want to help bring our system onto their drivers, and when we get that, we're going to be very competitive. So currently, on the demo that you tried, we're using an LCD screen, and where we go from there, yeah, it's probably OLED.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, content. I mean, this is obviously a new angle. I mean, it's not just about rendering a left and right view. It's not just about head tracking. Now we're talking about eye tracking as well. So what are the content considerations for this? Do you have a software developer's kit? How can content makers start to get involved?
Currently, our prototyping platform, everything is ran on Unity. So that's going to be supported straight out. We're looking now at Unreal Engine and various other engines as well. Plus, we're bundling it as a as a DLL. So when you've got your access to the DLL and our API, basically it's a matter of just loading it up and calling the functions and getting back the information. In Unity, for example, it's about 5 minutes to get a basic system up and running with aiming where your eyes are. Of course, to make the content more meaningful takes more time, and of course the developer using our technology will realize there's a lot more power than just shooting where you're looking.
Now, I noticed that this particular device, I know it's still a work in progress, it's orientational tracking, yes? But it's not quite, doesn't have that positional tracking yet. Is this a work in progress?
That's a work in progress, yes. Currently, actually, we do have positional tracking using external peripherals such as the Kinect. We are looking at making our own in-house solution, and I'm potentially going to be able to support any webcam. So I'll keep you posted about that.
Are there any latency concerns? Because I know even with Kinect, with the improvements they've made, it's still a somewhat latency device.
So my idea for that is we can release our own system for doing really low latency tracking. But whether or not we bundle it as part of the headset itself or as an external component, I'm considering about, because a lot of people will already have what they would consider an acceptable system. And if you've got the good head tracking, and we've got very good sensors in here, we can do a little bit of prediction, and it's not necessary to have an extremely high resolution optical tracking system with the sensor equipment that we've got. So some people, of course, would like that, and we're looking at that, but it's an area that we're researching. Yeah.
One of the things I was impressed with was, when we look around in the real world, we focus on things. It's not that everything's perfectly clear. We look around, and depending on what we're looking at, that's what we see as a focus, and everything else is somewhat blurred. Have you come up with a way to mimic that behavior with the Fove?
Absolutely, and we've already implemented that. That's in one of the demo that's just behind you there.
Can you elaborate how it works?
It's very simple. Basically, there's various effects and filters that you can apply in the post-processing step. It's just a shader, essentially, that works on collaboration with the depth buffer, and you basically know exactly where you're looking, and you know the depth of that, and you just put a tilt shift or a blur in the areas that you're not looking at. So
wonderful, wonderful. Now, prototype. Obviously, it's a work in progress, still inventing, creating. Do you have a time frame in mind before we're going to see like a full-fledged developer's kit?
So we're looking at doing a crowdfunding campaign in March, and I have a fairly ambitious plan of trying to get this out by Christmas this year. So I think it's possible. We're based in Asia. My lab and my office is based in about a $5 million tech shop. So we've got some pretty impressive resources behind us and a lot of manufacturing experience in our periphery. So I am pretty confident that we can release this year.
Now, I saw you were, of course, an alumni of the Microsoft Accelerator program. What did Microsoft think of all this?
Microsoft were very impressed with it, but where it goes from there, we just don't know. We're going to go and pay them a visit in Seattle this month, but what they're doing with head-mount displays, who knows?
Now, one of the applications I saw, which I thought was very interesting, was you were giving people who didn't necessarily have the full use of their hands and their arms the ability to play piano and music. Can you elaborate how that was done?
Sure. The piano system itself was basically just done through Unity and Open Sound Control. So we had game elements that would react to your eyes and send a MIDI signal over OSC to a grand piano, which would then press the keys.
Do you think there's, I don't know, like, was this a real application? When I say a real application, do you see this as a future direction where through eye tracking, where we give people the means to do things they otherwise wouldn't be able to do with devices like this?
We've already made a project for a disabled person who suffered ALS to control a robot. The Ori robots down there, they're actually here at CES. They can be controlled using our technology. So people with late-stage ALS are completely paralyzed, and the very last thing to go is their eyes. And so we give these people a private world that they are in full control of, and they can also bring that into the real world through peripheral technology and, say, control an accessibility robot that their family can take home with them, so they can have a presence in the living room of their family. They can be carried around, they can look around and do gestures and have a great old time. It was awesome. You should see his smile.
Is there something, you're tracking, I take it, the pupils of the eye. Mind you, maybe you're tracking more. Is there additional information that could be captured from that? Because, we're seeing a future with the metaverse and people interacting. What are some potential directions for this?
Well, other than the obvious applications of psychological manipulation and horror games, no, you can actually infer a little bit of the emotional state of a user. But that's kind of an advanced topic. Like, it involves looking at the pupil dilation. And of course, we can exactly measure the amount of light that the pupil's receiving on the scene and where they're looking, and thus calculate what their dilation should be. But it's a slightly inexact science. But developers will have access to our raw data streams, and of course, we'll be able to come up with things like inferring emotional state from the user, and also applying additional image processing, it's possible to determine whether someone's smiling or not just from looking at their eyes.
Wonderful. Now, this CES, we don't have to name names, but just, there's just so much out there. There's all kinds of head-mounted displays and a lot of interest in immersive technology, and the energy is obviously there. Yep. What are your thoughts on standards in this market? Do you have any opinions on that?
I think basically standards are something that we should really be strongly looking at, because without them it's going to be fairly hard for new players with innovative products to enter the market. So if there's like one standard where people can sort of, well, how would you say, if you can meet the standards, not only for interaction standard and data display standards, but also a standard way of interacting with the system on the software level, like a standardized API, that has significant advantages to, how would you say, basically to people who are willing to experiment and make new things. It gives them a much easier entry to the market. So
it's been argued, standards, too early to even talk about standards because people are still inventing, but is the opposite true? Are standards of a way to accelerate innovation?
It depends. I'm not 100% sure. Standardizing something prematurely is of course bad, but also not having a standard is extremely bad. So if the standards are well thought about, which I think that's very possible to be done, it will be an enabling. It will be very enabling for pioneers in the field. They can invent a new system and set their, if they meet the usability standards and have an API that is compatible, it'll be very easy to implement with current systems, rather than be like, oh no, it's a new system, how am I going to, that's got a massive cost, I don't want to support it. The game companies will be like, oh no, I'm not going to deal with that. But if there's a system in place, game companies could be like, well, hey, it's just a few lines of code to get this up and running, well, let's do it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad I finally got to see this, and wonderful work here. So this is Neil Schneider for MTBS TV, CES 2015. We will be back with more. Thanks for watching.